You're on.
Good evening, everyone. We would like to begin our annual meeting of the Pulaski County Historical Society. My name is Ryan Harrison. I'm the current president of the society. We only have one item on our agenda this evening for business, and that is the election of our officers and directors. The current slate that was presented for officers is President Ryan Harrison, Vice President and past President Kathy Thompson, Secretary and Genealogist Janet Onken, Treasurer Lynn Morrison, and currently the curator position is open. For term ending in 2024, we have Brian Capuch, Karen Fritz, and Judge Michael Schern. Remaining on the board with terms ending in 2022 is Sarah Croft, Jolie Simmermaker, and another vacancy. Term ending in 2023, Mary Connor, also our county historian, Becky Diltz, and Steve Morrison. Are there any additions to the current slate? Hearing none, do I have a motion to accept as presented? We have a motion from Brian. Do we have a second?
Yes.
From John?
I'll do it instead. I don't think it's being insulting. I'm sorry. Sorry, John.
All those in favor, and anybody that has a valid membership can vote. And I think John does. One of the faithful. All those in favor signify by saying aye, please.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. That would be the end of our business for our annual meeting. The only other thing I would like to remind everyone of is we do have memberships available. It can be an individual membership, a family membership, or a corporate membership. And if anyone has any questions about memberships, please stop and see Kathy before you leave today. Now I'd like to turn it over to Brenda, who is going to be our speaker this evening. Brenda?
First thing I want to do is we want to thank everybody here. I know a lot of you haven't been in this building yet. We've used it for a lot of baby shower, graduations, different functions. And I'd like to do the talk today on this location. We have a lot of things in our other museum that we talk about the family and the mill and everything else, but I'd like to talk strictly about what this is. Now, the mill property there was 15.3 acres of ground, and the town was actually plotted around the mill ground. This is part of the mill ground. This across the road was also classified as mill. Now, when you start over here, when the bridge comes across, that's lot 1 and 2, 3, 4, and then it goes on. So this was originally owned by Pulaski Manufacturing Company, and it consisted of the gentleman that platted the town, which was Daniel Short. They had a miller that was John Stevens. They had a father and son team, which is our direct line, Jonas Sr., Good, and their son Sam, and Ira Brown and John Decker. Well, eventually in 1967 or 1867, the original owners had all sold out. The last remaining was John Stevens, who was running the mill. And he sold to Low. And Mr. Capuch was just telling me he had one in Cass,
In White County.
in White County.
At West Bedford,
Okay.
which was the oldest settlement.
Okay. So, you know, he knew the business. He bought it in 67, but he sold it then in 1869, to Joseph Pryor Wood. Like you knew Glenwood, he's a direct line of the Pryor family. They had it up until, and I didn't even have to do my cheat sheets. The Woods family had it until they had it until the late 80s. I don't know why I didn't put that down. But the thing about this section, the Wood's son opened a harness shop on this spot. And from that time on, this spot was separate. It was always called the Wood Store, and it was Jacob C. that had it. He started, he built it in September of 1869, and he had his harness shop in here. Well, from then on, it kind of started changing. We had several saloons in here, mostly on the south half. It's a 40 by 40 building, and it was a 20 by 20 long shops. And the south side was always the saloon. Don't ask me why always the south side. They did have one, but he moved over here, so it seemed to stay in this location. They had several fires. And the last fire was in 1902, which burnt down at that time a 2-story building. You can see it on right there above you, the 2-story house on the building on the right side. That was where Nick Latz was the last one to have a saloon in here. And he happened to have married Mary Gilsinger. So it kind of has a connection with Paul. In 1902, both sides burnt down, and the neighboring shed or warehouse that JP and John Shank of Shank and Gilsinger had actually started out there in the little shop beside of it, the little warehouse. Well, when it burnt down, I thought that was it. But I went back through my notes, and he had actually rebuilt and had his saloon in here for 1 year. So this actually was where he had it, Nick had it. Now, where I get most of my facts from, I use tax records. I use the weekly columns in the newspaper are ideal. But you can use the census records, written materials. But when you see the tax record and you know there was a fire and all of a sudden there's nothing on that ground, you know that that was exactly where that place was. So it helped, you know, situate a lot of this. Ephraim Felker had this for a while, and it was a saloon and burnt down. So I don't know what it was. I know that some of the fires were caused by chimney, sparks coming out the chimney and actually settled on the roof. And Pulaski was known for fires. We had a lot of big ones. And so after Nick built this, and he was in here for a year, and he was a railroad man. Pulaski never got the railroad. We were going to buy a locomotive. We tried everything under the sun. They would send out feelers saying there was going to have one come from Star City and then go through us and go to Francisville. They never materialized. So all of our businesses Shank and Miller, Gilsingers eventually, the different families that had businesses here had to move because they needed to be around the train. And so some went to Star City, some went to Winnebago, but the train was what killed us. So after Nick left, it was empty for a while, and then the Star City Telephone Company moved in. And they were here for a few years, and then it was just left empty. Well, John Miller's family, I don't know if you guys remember, you know Edna Benell, and anyway, Johnny's family, Ed, the town butcher at that time, they had, it's right behind Ryan, that's the picture of their store, and in 47, they had a fire. And that, the one where the pump star was the original butcher shop, goods had a butcher shop in there. Anyway, that was known where the butcher would be. That had a fire when they ended up moving over here. And then this store eventually closed in the early 70s. So that's more or less what this place was then. What we're doing here now is we want a place to come gather and celebrate and remember. We are hoping that people will come use the little center. It's free of charge. We wouldn't be 121 years old at Greenmark if we hadn't had everybody behind us. So this is our way of giving back to the community, and anybody can come use it. We only see 6 people work, but it's a nice size for special showers and things. Now, we have, I'm going to be bringing the town items down from the P.J. Gilsinger Museum. We start out first with the ledger over here, which is an October 1954 ledger. It actually is or 18. It's actually every saw for the mill. And the original owners, they got together $1,400, and then they each chipped in wood, and that's how they paid for the building. Now, it was a regular barn raising when they had it, and so once it got going, it was a lifesaver to the farmers, because they were having to drive or take it down to Monticello, and depending on how the river was and everything, and flooding if they could go over. So that starts out our displays. We have an American flag, which is a banner type flag. 1861, Kansas had become a state. The quilt came with it, so we didn't kind of want to separate them. Each one of the trees on there has a date. The oldest date is 1848 in Philadelphia. The back of the sign actually has a northern, I don't know if you want to call that their emblem, but anyway, it was used at Lincoln's second inaugural speech in Philadelphia. The first one was given in March at that time, the second one in Philadelphia. That way, where people could hear it. And it has been appraised, and it's 102 inches by 80, I think. It's very fragile. You can tell by the pictures, it's very fragile. So we thought that the best way of doing the display of that was to go ahead and fold it. So we've got things like that. We've got pictures of the area of all the old buildings, and I'm trying to collect pictures of the families. I finally got the Wood family. They had the picture with the Wood family by the mill that actually was a boarding house. And it was a beautiful house. It caught fire twice and finally burnt to the ground. But it was one of those that was here. They built it in 1878, and it was here until the early 20s, I think. So as you go around the room, you just kind of see various things. I collect depression wear, so I've got a lot of different kinds of the depression wear. I also collect kerosene lamps. They are throughout, and there'll be more coming down. I have a lot of Johnny's items, which are currently on the back wall, which that will be the school area when we get the stuff moved. But a lot of those items were stuff that either Johnny would have had here, no meat with mold on it, no dead mice in the plastic or the ice case. Don't have that, but I do have a lot of the items that he sold. And so that will all be the school. We also have Ed Miller, butcher knife. I talked to his nephew. I said he had married a shank at one time. And so we had the picture of him with his knife. He was a big guy. And I told them, I said, okay, I got the picture of your grandfather with the knife. And they said, aha, we found the knife. So we now have the picture and the knife back together again. And there's some things from the Shank family, and we've got some things coming from the Miller family also. The Falveys, we were talking about, Falveys actually had their store in the north half of this block. Above them was Dr. Morris had a doctor's office. I think when the lot 11 here on the corner, the vacant lot, it had a fire in 1909 that burnt out several buildings, and Dr. Smith came in here after that and had his office for a little while. Let's see. Then in the very first little room, that's the last room to be organized. We're putting in a church room, and it'll be for the Catholic Church and for the Presbyterian Church. So we've got a quilt hung by some ladies that made it for one of the priests in the 40s, I think. And we've got it hanging out, but we've got the baptismal fonts from both churches. The baptismal font from the Presbyterian Church and a baptismal bowl that was from the Reformed Church that's been pasted back together. They went to throw it away, and one of the ladies says, no, don't you know what that is? And so they kept it. So I have that also from that. The Good family more or less had donated land. They had church at their house. And I was always under the impression it was German Reformed, but I do have an actual flyer that they were having somebody come speak. And it was called the Reformed Church. Anyway, so we'll have that in the front room. Is there any questions on anything in the area? Yes.
How long have you had it? Where did you get it from? And how did
I got it from the Ryans, and that was 1 year, 3 years ago.
3 or 4 years ago?
Yeah. We just got it complete last year. They had, it was kind of a struggle. If people would have seen it when it was, yeah, it had a lot of cleaning to do, and we tried to keep the floor is underneath. We ended up having to put another floor over the top of it because it was just, but when they were down underneath trying to wire and everything, I asked them about the foundations. Because with it burning down so many times and rebuilding, and they said, yeah, there's just pieces of foundation all over the place. So they were having trouble getting in and out because of the different foundations. But this part was, and Johnny had made a comment to me, but I haven't been able to get into the courthouse or the library to see exactly their fire and when they moved over here, if they had bought it and Johnny had remodeled it first and they were gonna move in here anyway, or if they just after the fire decided they'd buy this and come in. Johnny would never help me out on that one. He wasn't too sure. Did he ever talk to you guys about it?
I remember him saying something about the telephone story, right?
No, one story.
One story. I remember him saying something about there was a building that burned. And
That's two story.
they used wood from that building to put this building together.
That's it, and there's still wood over there from the difference. It's hard to tell where, and the doors you don't have any clue where they're coming from, the windows. They didn't throw away anything in those days. The building that Paul's grandfather built with John Shank, it sat right where our museum is. And when they dismantled that in 1949 to build this block building and the other block building, they actually used the wood from that building to make the roof. So when you walk into our upper museum, it actually shows white paint and the boards are all folded together to make long ones. And so, yeah, they used every piece that they could salvage. And they would rebuild.
Year was the last that plant.
54.
Basically, the original Francis Stone, it's all those little houses.
The prairies, you think they floated the lumber down? from
They did.
someplace else?
They did, and it tells in there. And a funny thing about that book, well, it happened to be in somebody's attic with some old yearbooks, but it's a yearbook from Knox and some letters that Carl Gilsinger had wrote to Frank Lowry, or yeah. Frank's last name. Meyer, okay. Mike and Karen, yeah, and Karen. Anyway, Jeannie Fox was getting ready to move and she said, I got a box of letters. Would you be interested in it? And so she just brought down and left it when I wasn't home. And so I'm going through this box and I'm thinking, oh my God, you know, nobody would understand what that book is. And on the front of it, the first part of it's gone. But on the front page, it's written in pencil. And if you hold it right in the light, it was a commissioners meeting. They didn't do anything, but they met. You know? And so, yeah.
Some things haven't changed.
Yeah. So when you open up the cover then, and it talks about all this wood. And I'm seeing all these names that, you know, have been in my life for 4 years, but to see it in print, it really meant a lot to me. And it talked about flowering. And so I didn't know that the headquarters of lumber is in Texas, but it is. And Duke University has a big forestry unit. I contacted everybody under the sun. I contacted Michigan's lumber companies. I finally had somebody that could send me copies of logging terms that was in 1870s book, and it didn't have flowering in it. And the lady saying, you're misinterpreting it. Well, we had Ira Brown, and then we had flower. So the OWN, they had written several places, and we knew it was brown. So it had to be flower. And I'm thinking the tree flowers at the bottom. You know, they were straightening up. No. So I looked under all the different nationalities that it could have been a word in Dutch or German or something, and it was still drawn a blank. Well, every year that we go down to the state fair, I always like to go to where there's song and light. And I talk to the old timers and, you know, I ask them. Well, I keep getting the same answer. No, can't be flour. And that doesn't, you know, and I said, no, that's what it looks like. Well, finally, I took a copy down of one of the pages. And the one older man said, the floor has to be a certain thickness. And what you do is you have like a base and then you put another crossways on to make it stronger. But that is actually flooring. So the whole time I was looking for flour, it was boards used for flooring. And if you put that and this other board together, you come out with the floor. So we finally got that. Yeah. But they used a lot of poplar, and like you said, it was floated down here. They actually, the mill race is about down by the Presbyterian church. If you kind of go towards the river, it's down at that end. And Robert Budd and Adam Sinmaker actually dug that. It's blue clay, and they had to use picks trying to get, you know, down there. And you can still see most of it today. But they would float the logs down. And then they would actually, well, then used it later for the wheel, because we had a flat wheel. Ours wasn't the round. If the water came in and it was flat, turbine. Yeah, I was Danny to do it. I think Rudy would do it for me. I just gotta get the plan. But we assume, and of course our mill burnt, and it was kind of one of those things. It became just a dinosaur here in town, and nobody wanted it. And the electric company had bought this area. And we would have been Indiana Beach if the farmers would have, because they wanted to actually flood this area. I know the terrain, I don't know how that would have worked, but they actually bought us thinking that the power plant might be around here, but it didn't work, so they went farther south. But the guys still were used to going to the mill, and they probably took beverages with them, and they played cards. Well, the women weren't real happy. So one night, the mill caught fire. Well, the guys were very concerned. They got it out fast. Now, they didn't say these other buildings when they caught fire, but with their mill, they caught it. And so the next time the ladies did it, it burned to the ground. So that is why we don't have a mill. So that was the last one. And I do have one of the original keys. It had been passed down through several generations. And I was fortunate enough that the young man that inherited the key was 15 and he wanted to buy a car. And so he let me purchase it. Of course, they can come down, see it anytime they want. If they want it back, that's fine. But I actually have it to show. The sawmill, they kind of kept it running because they used it to build the town and that. So I'm not sure exactly when it closed down. But they actually, they had a boarding house, but it was not the best known boarding house was the Woods Home. And that wasn't until 78. So there was a lot of houses that used that.
How long was Annie Miller in this store?
See, I don't know. She would have been here from like 47 on. So, and Johnny, and I couldn't remember for sure. I know she always sat out here with papers and stuff after they closed. And I was small enough, I didn't. I don't remember. So it was-
She used to call around for information for the journals.
see, I had a job for a while. And thank the Lord for people like that, because you can tell. And I mean, a lot of it's just plain gossip. But there was a lot of it that was telling, you know, who was where, and you got relatives that came, so you got a familiarity about the families. And I started to call them up around the time of the Centennial, mainly to get the word out. I had free advertising, you know, I put the column in, and then I could say what I wanted to say about, you know, what's going on.
Before the internet.
Yeah. Well, and I always had a fact, did you know? Huh. Well, I learned real quick because Janine Smith was still alive. And the paper was good. If they had a boo-boo in there, they would correct it. So I had a fact in there, and she corrected me. And I'm thinking, no, it's here in print. I don't think you're right. So anyway, I made sure that I had information that was older than her that she would not know. Because nobody ever called me on it. But, you know, I took things straight out of the paper, so, you know, it wasn't. But yeah, and of course I spent years in the, with the it's written, because I copy every Pulaski news that had anything relevant. And I've got, you know, books at home with all this information, and I don't know, does the Historical Society still have those tax record books that were up above Shanks?
Very informative.
Okay, yeah, I used to carry them down, bring them home, look at them, then carry them back up, get another batch, and then carry them down, yeah. But you find out a lot through those. And it was easy enough because the Pulaski lots, you know, stood out. And so it wasn't hard to. It was a booming town. One time we had 4 saloons running. Not all of them were licensed, but they were running. We had 2 big mercantiles. Hobie Lowe had a mercantile here on the corner that Sam Lowe had it for a while, and the big one was Kristen March, then it became March and Barker. The last one I think was House that was in there. That was running the same time as Shank and Miller's at that time. It was a mercantile. JP had the hardware and implements, so he was separate from that. But you know, we had 2 big stores, and we had a hardware store. Of course, when it burnt down, the Watts family moved back to Logan'sville. They're the same family that has a Watts ice cream, if you've ever heard of Watts ice cream. So, you know, we had all the business here in town, the doctors, the harness makers, and all the craftsmen, but we didn't have the drink. So everybody moved to a lot more. So a lot of the names you think of as being here as host, they ended up, Of course, I had an idea that we should, since we're in the centennial that we had the Saloon Girls, and that's Diane, Denise Johnson's dress. We had Saloon Girls, we had a madam, Babe Rita was a madam, and Jake was the handlers for girls. And I thought, if we just put a ferry boat, like the General Jackson or something, out there on the river, put it on tracks. And I know an Indian, so we could have got, that cash. Just put it on a track, take it down to Indiana Beach, then bring it back. You could add showgirls, you could add meals, you could add a highway. But I never got, maybe that's what we should start next. Any other questions? Well,
Can I talk a little bit about this building here?
yeah.
just a little bit. And I don't know if you have your bearings on where this building was, but it was right on the other side of this garage. So the bridge wasn't there. So when they built the bridge in 1966, and they tore that building down. That building was still there. It had a fire, but everything was still in. So it was a great place to go in. There was a pool table in there, and it had, I don't know if it's broken down or, I don't know how slate it is, but it was a slate pool table. And then in the middle, this little middle building here was where the barber chair was still. And then in this building on the end, soda fountain was still in.
Wow.
But of course, it had been all damaged. That building actually sat there for years.
Yeah.
From when that had been partially burned, and then Donnie or Jenny, I understand it was kind of a hangout for the school
And during class.
and during class. They come down to Annie's store because Annie's store survived our store across the street because in 1959, Gilsinger closed the grocery store portion of the building over here. Don Deere. Probably about, yes, 5 or 6 years, because I don't think she was here. But then you had Edgar Bird in barbershop.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people remember Edgar Bird. Sauce. So this was real handy for him down the street, but he could really cut hair good. When, otherwise, he was kind of shaky. And then he was uptown for a while. Well, you know, when I Jack's are, there used to be a little barber shop. Consolidated that, kind of where the dining room, where that dining room. After the one But I also remember Annie selling the newspapers on Sunday, and she would sit in her car.
And after that, in Weaverby's garage, they sold a newspaper over there.
Or you could go to Annie's.
Yeah. Now, I was told the kids during, I don't know what class it was, but anyway, the teacher must have been preoccupied because they would send somebody out the second story window and down. I think it was probably the first story because the first story is high enough. Huh? No, there, yeah, he was one of them that was talking about it. But anyway, they'd send him down. He'd come here and get bologna sandwiches and take them back to class. So, yeah, you can come here for that.
I have a question for Paul. The old fish used to be over here. When was that? Was that a highway or was that just a road?
It was a county.
It's a county road.
Yeah,
County road. And where did it go?
Right over by, it's a garage.
Along the river towards Monticello
Anyway, mine was just like it was today.
I don't know what that was years ago with State Road 1.
It was, yeah, when
They
I
squared it off for 119.
yeah, but it divided just like it, kind of like it does now. You could either go on down the river or go to the right. But it was just a county road at that time.
I think it probably went down that river road, I would
Yeah.
expect it, there by the cemetery, I think probably.
Along here.
Yeah, I think it's all
So there was a one,
yeah, and they used to, the papers would talk about this big thrashers coming over. And everybody holding their breath. They didn't know. They had some other bridges that, we had trouble flooding and just, sturdy enough. So they had this one, but then they built. So there's two islands there. At that location.
I know.
Yeah, they're totally. Right, right, right.
Cemetery out, cemetery out west.
Yeah. Right, right, and down here, what island is that? That they go across to? Yeah. Yeah, they had that. We've got an 1891-2 picture, and that is a decent sized tree. That tree, if it could talk.
We have, it's surprising to be.
See, Mrs. Pryor was, she was living alone. They had built a house in that lot. And one night, this was after her husband died, one night, a drunk tried to get in the house. Now, we don't know if he thought it was his house, or what he was doing, but anyway, she killed him. And there was no question about it. He tried to break in, she'd been in her home, that was it. Yeah. That's what they were saying, he was drunk. Yeah. And I've never, we've got one picture, tintype with a sheriff on it, I never have figured out who that guy was.
The wood hotel that she talked about.
Right.
I think she has some pictures of different homes.
I've still got those over at the other museum, they'll be coming down.
Tie into the.
Yeah. And there, I do have a map up here that shows, well, the plat of the town, that also shows how much of this actually was mill property. And of course, anything done on the mill property that was just hidden, Michigan, didn't know where, we were talking about. Unless you were a surveyor.
What was here before? Anything?
No, they platted the town around
Where
the
did
mill
this
actually.
a house or two houses here?
Now, she said the bridegrooms just lived across the river. And he, I'm pretty sure he was the one that sold. There was nothing here.
Yeah, they came with the church, the people came with the church, with the Catholic church.
And see, the Catholic Church originally was on the county line, well, a half a mile up from the county line, where Allen Howe's parents had their place, Malco, Pro Cemetery. If you turn and go west, in Pro Cemetery at that T, about halfway down is where the first Catholic church was. And I know they were having trouble because we have some unmarked graves and they're trying to figure out who they were. They actually dug up the cemetery there and moved them up to the new cemetery. So that's what I'm thinking, that's where those extra graves came from, because they had it sectioned off when they would sell the property. That still was cemetery ground, then all of a sudden it wasn't cemetery ground. The South Cemetery, the Catholic.
Okay.
The Catholic cemetery. They just moved the church up to, and that was Gilsinger ground that they bought there, and they had a convent and a school and a priest house and barn. And the church, I was told in the deed book, Bell Center. I don't know if you guys know about where Bell Center is. They had a church down there and they needed to build it. So when our South Catholic Church sold, they bought. And I guess it was kind of, what I would think of as a holy roller type, the amens and standing and the yeah, it was a wild church. And the Baker family had a fire. And the church at that time had built another church to replace the old one they moved. And they gave the church to the Bakers to replace their house. Now it's in the deed book. If you go down to Monticello and you try to go to the courthouse, you have to know exactly what page, what you're looking for before they'll show it to you. You can't just go in and leaf through, because I find most of my stuff accidentally going through, or I find something that I can use later. But they're real strict about, or they were. I haven't been down there for probably 10 years. So, but a gentleman told me it was actually in the deed book that that house was moved to that farm. And I never could figure out who owned it, so I could go in and see it, because they said something about the odd closets. Was it the confessional? You just wondered if that's what they meant, because it wasn't. But I've got some pictures of the house before they tore it down. But yeah, everything was sold, and then most of like the West Church, it was dismantled and used to build a building. So they used everything, and they moved a lot of things. But like this, the foundation on this, our daughter has just redone the old Shank house that's on the corner of north or west of our house. And she actually has a room that is on 4 stones. That is the foundation. She's still fighting the groundhog, and I don't know what they're going to do about it. But they just come right through that sand and yeah, into her basement. So they're still fighting. But it's on 4 stones. And they said this building, when they started remodeling it, wasn't on the corners. It had shifted, so they were trying to get it, back even so that they could do it. And there was a wall here, and I imagine it was that way from day Johnny moved in that they would have had the wall in here. But the licenses for the taverns were they're unique, because they say exactly where that place is, how big it is, if it's on a 1st or 2nd floor, in a 1 or 2 story building, if it fronts the street, or, they give a really good description of the piece. And so those are really good when you're trying to figure out what building. Well, yeah, in 1910, there was 123 actually lived in town. But see, that across the river isn't town. So we're just talking on this side. So that kind of the B.S. Hoover addition, which is right west of the school, that little subdivision, that was added on, so that brought more people in. They never, we just didn't grow because of the fact that people weren't, because you'd have to pay your drayman to get everything here from Star City. That's
There
it.
a saloon, kind of a bill of aids prior to bill of aids, or there were 4 saloons in town.
Bill and Babe's, and that gets into Bonnie and Clyde. Bill and Babe's, Bill and Babe's Saloon or Tavern. We have a block building on the corner right across the street. There's a cement slab, and in that there was a wooden structure there. Now, huh? So they were actually in the garage. That's where the cabin was?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I got a picture of that someplace in here. They had the saloon there, and then they moved it across the street. And one of the owners, and this is something that I need to research too. The Gorley family came from up by Calumet. And he had a good factory job, and the factory closed, and he got the opportunity to buy the Bluebird Tavern up there. And so he started a tavern. His sister-in-law actually was raising Bonnie's dog. Now, when you go through this, and it's Tim Radabaugh's mom wrote this book. And after about 5 bottles of wine, you get through it because she's thinking, but she's talking, and it's hard to keep everybody straight. But then towards the end of the book, she's finally getting all, you've got all the cast characters, the in-laws, the outlaws, and all this. They actually bought a plot of ground down here on the sheriff's sale. And Bonnie's sister and mother had raised this little girl. She had her when she was like 15. Her actual husband was sent to prison. So she never divorced. They say in the books, and when she was shot, she had on the wedding ring. She wasn't married to Bonnie. So they thought it was the wedding ring. She was still married to this guy in the prison. And so the little girl was living out here with her aunt. The mother had died, and I can't remember who, from Arkansas. Anyway, they moved up here on this plot of ground, and they were kind of freeloading off of a family member that had bought it. But Bonnie had come to get her daughter, and Delby Masterson, Steve River Delby, yeah, he worked for the sheriff's department at the beginning. Delby went up and was staking out because they had heard that Bonnie and Clyde would come up and visit his house. And so he stopped at Harold Johnson's parents' house first. And he was, I don't know, asleep on the porch or something. Anyway, he wasn't getting anything out of him. So he goes to the mother, and she had a pig that was giving birth. And she had no time for this guy asking stupid questions. And so he finally left and did find Radabaugh's house. And this daughter was living across the street from the Radabaugh place. So they stake it out. Bonnie and Clyde are there. They go out the back. Why wouldn't you have the back covered? So yeah, so I've talked to Rich Wine, and they don't really have records like we have, but he was going to see if he could find out something about that, but supposedly, yeah. And she's telling all this because she was a young girl when all this was happening. And her dad had the tavern up there, Young County Met, and they were down here, and I guess they'd come in the back door because, they couldn't be seen. And so they were actually in this building down here at one time. But then when I was doing my newspaper column, I was doing one on teachers. And I was calling the different people that had taught school. It seemed like everybody taught school at the beginning, the guys too. You know, they said first job was teaching. But anyway, I talked to a lady and she had been a waitress for a while. And she said on Sunday morning, the guys would come down from Chicago. And because they were back and different things, she had started telling what they'd been doing all night. Smell of booze, dressed to the T, you know, the nice suits and hats. And they were really polite. And they said, aren't you nervous? And she said, no, they treat you so nice. But the first thing they'd order was pie. They had with the breakfast, they wanted the pie first because they didn't get pie like that around. So yeah, we had a lot of them, and they talk about Stark County and the new side stills and the runs that they made on 69 area down and yeah, so.
Bar historic? No.
No, I was telling Fred, Doc Salvage is down in, it was in Indianapolis, and it kind of, on their website, it almost was like there was a father and a son or something. Evidently, the son has got it, but he's moved to Tennessee. So this was bought sight unseen, because pictures I saw were just pieces of wood. They're from 3 different bars. And 2 came from Illinois and 1 came from Ohio. And they put it together. It's hard to get a short bar. You know, everything's long. And I only had so much room to work with. So yeah. So, you know, at first I thought the bar burned down here. But then when I went back through all my material, which I haven't probably looked at for, you know, I look at sections of it. I look back and I thought, oh my gosh, she did rebuild after 1902. So I don't know what happened. Now, Danny says that his, it comes from up north. So I swear that's probably where it was falling. So. But the family that had her, the child, I haven't been able, you know, I haven't had a chance to look at census records to see if, you know, she was living with them at a time that would have given them name. But I guess she threw up. I guess he fit, she wasn't going to go with Bonnie and this, that, and the other. And Bonnie says, I don't want you if you're going to be this big of a brat, you know, to have to tag along. So she just left her.
Do you know when the Reboot garage was built?
That was in the, I would say the 1860s part of it. I've got a picture from the Star City Sesquicentennial, because why rebuild the wheel, it's there. And that shows at different stages. And so they've been at the same location. It was a blacksmith shop and then a wagon shop. And so they just kept remodeling.
Were they over there before the bridge, yeah?
Yeah. Before, yeah, they would have been, because see, they actually lived, there were Mount Winter, or is that Mount Winter's? Hooper's house, a 2-story house, yeah.
Before that, John.
Yeah. But, and see, they sold the ground to the church to build the house. And that, of course, the house was built in 1897 or something. Then they built the church. And the reason they built the church was the bridge fund. So they were over there before that. See, I don't have.
Yeah, when they combined the two,
And I have pictures of both bridges over here in the. They talked at one time that the commissioners was going to build a covered bridge. I don't know where they're going to have. And they did find a dinosaur bone when they were digging the race thing, but they never went after the rest. I guess they figured that it's just one bone. I'll try somebody. Or dinner.
You're saying there was like 100 people in this community,
There's 123 in 1910.
and there were 4 saloons?
That was prior to that. That was probably when Samuel Fisher was here, Efren Felker was over there for a while. Shakes had theirs.
was the bill.
And see, like, Shank and Gilsinger started on Friday the 13th, October 13th. He get a mail. And he was the postmaster, and so he wanted to be open to get every, the permit. And they were in the little building, like I said, warehouse beside of that 2-story. The older people that moved in, and kids moved on the farm. And we had a lot of blacksmiths that lived here in town. Like when they had the fire, that's a picture of the downtown. The big building on the left would have been Kristen March or Barker's. And then the next little building was the tin type picture over here, and that was the Shank Mercantile and Saloon. Next to it, that taller building was actually the first school that was here in town. It was up on lot 31, up on the hill. And when they built the new school, they moved that down and made it a city hall. So they had meetings there. Next to it there's a picture of a little candy shop with AG and John Shank, or Charlie Shank. Then after that was John Smith's doctor's office, and then a little livery station, and that all burnt down. Yeah, that's why I've got a fire hose over in the other museum, because, and you know,
That's what happened to the last guy's school.
yeah.
It's the one before the.
See, they said that they were building a new school. Well, if you look at the two, and that stuff's still over there. If you look at it when they remodeled, what they did was they took the roof off and just put a second floor. They didn't rebuild, or they actually just added the floor. Yeah, that night. And then they used it was Gilsinger's over here at the time. They used the second floor for classrooms, they use people's garages, they use people's homes, they use I think they use the creamery or something. They had classes spread all over the place.
Yeah, I remember people coming in the store.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so that's,
See, that would have been prior to 1927.
was it 22 years?
The old school. Yeah, didn't, I think the old for, still 19.
So 22 was your first year?
Yeah, you're right, 22, because that's what the scoreboard is.
So we had an awful lot of fires, but they did have a truck at lot 11. And so they saved the houses. And it didn't get the Gilsinger store on the corner. But they had help from Winterman. But they couldn't save those little buildings, they were so old. And it was a spark from the chimney from the town hall that had caught it on fire. And but that was also a big grocery store at that time, the Shank. Mike Link had it when it burned though. And yeah.
What year was they had the movies? You remember?
On the wall.
Yeah.
Pre-show.
Yeah.
Probably in the 50s. I don't know.
'Cause that was on the block building, right?
Yeah.
And they built them in 41. Oh, yeah, we had it during the specific.